Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis 24b of Maseches Kiddushin. We are starting what I think is 17 lines down the page. The first word on the line is lecherus. We're starting from the end of the line where it says Tanu Rabbanan. So we're continuing our discussion of the Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave, and in particular how they can go free if the master either blinds them or makes them deaf, injures their ears so that they go deaf, or actually the Gemara learned out really any other damage to one of the limbs at the extremities. So any external limb that's useful, basically, if the master would ruin that permanently, damaging in a permanent manner that it won't regenerate, it won't grow back, that would also set the Eved free. So the Brisa says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Bikulam Eved Yotze Bahem Lecherus. For all of these situations where he goes free, in either for losing a tooth or an eye or any of the other limbs, so he goes out free, Vitzarech get shicher, but he still needs a bill of redemption. He still needs that get shicher, the bill of freedom. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So what he seems to be saying is the master is forced to set him free, but the freedom only comes about once he receives that actual bill of freedom. Rabbi Meir says, Eino tzarech, he doesn't need it. He goes free. He or she, once he or she has that injury occur to them, then they just go free without a document. Rabbi Eliezer Amar tzarech. Rabbi Eliezer joins Rabbi Shimon and says, you need the get shicher. Rabbi Tarfon Amar, Eino tzarech. Rabbi Tarfon says, you don't need it. Rabbi Kiva Amar tzarech. Rabbi Kiva says, you do need it. Hamachriyim lifnei chachamim omrim, and those who decide in front of the chachamim, in front of the sages, it's actually a term I don't think I've ever seen before. I don't know if it appears anywhere else in Shas exactly in this way. It refers to a group of the Rabbanim, of the Chachamim, the sages, who were called the decisors. Not clear who they were. I think I saw a reference somewhere. Certain names where I saw that were mentioned as possibilities, but whoever they are, they're called the Machriyim Lifnei Chacham, certain sages that seem to have a special status. They say, Nir in Divrei Rabbi Tarfon b'shein v'ayin, Shatara zach salo, b'Divrei Rabbi Kiva b'shar ivarim, hoel k'nas chachamimu. So these other sages say, we appreciate, we agree with the words of Rabbi Tarfon, who said that you don't need a get shicher, you don't need a bill of freedom. That's when we're dealing with a shein v'ayin, a tooth or an eye. If the injury was to the tooth or the eye, which is discussed explicitly in the Torah, so then you go free without the need for a bill of freedom. However, they said, we agree with Rabbi Akiva that you do need a get shicher, you do need this bill of freedom, b'shari varma, if the slave is being set free for any of the other limbs. Why? Hoil v'knas chachamenu, since it is just a fine of the sages that he has to set them free. That's how they say. They say that being set free for those other limbs is a knas chacham, it's a fine of the sages. Asks the Gemara, knasu? It's a fine of the rabbis, they made this up? Kraika darshinan, they're learning out from the verses. It's a deoraisa. It comes from the Torah that you go free for the other limbs. It's not a fine imposed by the rabbis. So rather, what are they saying? Hoel umedrash chachamim. Since it is a drasha of the chacham, it's learned out. It's not explicit. Therefore, you still need a get shicher, you still need a bill of freedom. Now that too is difficult to hear, because even if it's a drasha, but it's still a deraisa, it's still from the Torah, why are they insisting on a get shicher, on a bill of freedom? So one approach is in Tosfos brings two, but I'll just tell you one. One is that really, midoraisa, according to Torah law, they don't need this get shechur. But the rabbis were concerned that if the slave would be set free from one of these other limbs, the master might come and come back to them, meet them in the street, and claim, oh, you really belong to me. And people won't know, people won't realize the halacha that says that you go free even for one of the other limbs, because it's not explicit. So the ones that are explicit, we're not worried about this. The ones that are not explicit, they're only learned out, the other limbs, so that we're concerned the master might come and accuse, and claim that the slave was never set free, and people won't know the halacha that really he does go free for this. So therefore the rabbi said, we're still going to let's require him to also give a bill of freedom. It's for the benefit of the slave, so that afterwards they can have proof that they were actually set free. That's one approach. Okay, the Gemara asks, "My taima de Reb Shimon." What is the reasoning behind Reb Shimon's opinion that you do not need Reb Shimon was the opinion that you do need a get shechur. Why does he say you need a bill of freedom? Why don't you just go free? So Yalif shiluach meisha. And by the way, Reb Shimon was saying it both for other limbs and shein v'ayin, even for the eye and the tooth. He's still saying you need a get shechur. Why? So Yalif shiluach meisha. He was learning a gezerah shava from a woman, meaning from when a man divorces his wife, where it also uses the language of sending. So here, in freeing a slave, or a slave going free after having its eye or tooth knocked out, also it uses the language of sending. Lachafshi yishalchena, you shall send him free. So we learn out to compare it in gezerah shava to a woman being sent out of a marriage, being divorced. Ma isha bishtar, and just like we know a woman, when she gets divorced, it has to be with a document, it's with a get. Ebenami bishtar, so we're going to apply that also to a slave when he's freed because of shein v'ayin, but it's only because of a tooth or an eye, it's only with a document, it's only with a get. That is the opinion of Reb Shimon. The Reb Meir, and Reb Meir responds, Reb Meir said, no, you don't need it, you never need it. For a slave being set free for an eye, a tooth, or even one of the other limbs, you don't need a get shechur. Says Reb Meir, Ikasav chafshi lebesav kidei kamarta. If the pasuk said yishalchenu chafshi, you should send them free, so then it would make sense. Like you're saying, you send them free, but you have to still do something to send them free. However, hashta dekasav lachafshi yishalchenu, but now that it says to freedom you shall send them, havalei chafshi meikara. It mentions the freedom first to teach you that the freedom already happened. They're already free. As soon as says Reb Meir, as soon as their eye or tooth is eliminated, so then the slave is free. Lachafshi, to freedom. Yishalchenu, then you send them out. So the sending them out, I guess, for him is just more of a formality, but they're already free once they lose that eye or tooth or any other limb, according to Reb Meir. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Now we're going to go into some more specifics about, detailed questions about this being set free for these various things. So, Hikal al Eino, Visama, if a person strikes his slave on the eye and blinds it, Al Azno B'charsha, or on the ear and makes him deaf, Eved Yotze B'ayin L'cheiros, then the slave goes free. Doesn't have to be knocked out. It could just be, damaged in a way that no longer functions. The slave goes free. Kinegeg eino ve'eino. What if the person strikes near the eye and now the slave can't see? Kinegeg azno ve'eino shomea, or near the ear and now he can't hear? Ein eved yotze b'ayin l'cheiros. Then the slave does not go free. What does it mean that he strikes near? So what it means is that he uses sound. He banged on the wall, it means, Rashi says. And he scared him by the sound. And now somehow as a result it blinding him. I don't know how that would work exactly. But from a very loud sound, the slave is now blinding or made deaf. That is easier to understand. So there, the Brisa says, Ein eved yotze b'ayin l'cheiros. For that, the slave doesn't go free. It has to be a direct hit. It can't be from damage from sound. Amar Rav Shimon Rav Ashi. Rav Shimon said to Rav Ashi, "L'meimra dekalo lav klumu." Are you saying that sound is nothing? That we don't consider sound to be something that damages in halacha? V'hatani Rami Bar Yecheskel, but Rami Bar Yecheskel taught, Tarnagol shahoshit rosho la'avir kli zechuchas. If a chicken sticks its head into the airspace of a glass jar, v'takabo, and then it sounds, it blows, but I guess whatever, it's like a rooster actually, so it crows inside, v'shavro, and it breaks the dish, it breaks this jar, mishalim nezek shalim, the owner is required to pay full damages for the jar, even though it was damaged with sound. The Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Rav, and Rabbi Yosef said that they said in the Beis Medrash of Rav, sus shetzanaf, if a horse neighs, v'chamor shenir, or a donkey brays, b'shavru kelim, and they break vessels, b'soch habayis, in the house, mishalmim chatzi nezek, so they have to pay half damages. The chicken paid full damages, here you pay half damages. It seems to be going in different opinions, actually, how you relate to this type of damage. It's not really our topic, but the point is, in either wet case, there was damages paid. So we are considering this noise that the animal makes to be of significance. So we see that the halacha does consider damage from noise. So how come if you bang on the wall, if the master bangs on the wall, makes a very loud sound and makes the slave deaf, that's not enough to set him free? Why not? So the Gemara says, Amarle, so he said back, so this was Rav Ashi's response to Rav Shimon, Shani Adam, it's different when you're damaging a man. Those other cases, you were damaging a jar, or other vessels, so there, we consider the noise to be damaging, and you have to pay for that. But Shani Adam, but a person is different. Dekevam de bardasu, because since a person has knowledge, a person has a brain, has a mind, it's not just an inanimate jar. Iu mivis nafshe. We consider that he scared himself, meaning the person who got damaged is implicit in this also, that he allowed himself to become scared to the extent that it made him blind or deaf. That's what it says. Kiddushin, like we learned in a brisa, hamavis es chavero, if a person scares his friend, pater midinei adam, b'chai b'dinei shamayim. So you're exempt from paying damages in a human court. Now, the heavens will take care of you. You're obligated on a heavenly level, but in a human court, we don't hold you liable. Ketzad, what's the case? Taka be'azno v'charsho. If you blow into you blow a trumpet or shofar or something into the guy's ear, and you make him deaf, pater, you are exempt. So here we have a brisa to the same effect that says that when you're damaging a person with sound, you are exempt. At least we can't hold you liable in a human court. And that's the same idea over here with the slave. However, if you hold on to the person and then blow in their ear and make them deaf, then you do have to pay for that. You do have to pay the damages for that. Because there, you held him down. If you hold him down, apparently that's different. So it's not entirely in the person's brain that we blame them, that they sort of allowed themselves to become scared. But I guess also it's that they remain there. If you hold the person down, then you would have to, if the offender would hold the guy down and then blow in his ear, then apparently if he deafens him, then he is responsible to pay. But in our case, with the slave, we're talking about, I guess he didn't hold him down, he just banged on the wall, made a very loud noise, scared him, made him blind, made him deaf. There, that would not be enough to set the slave free. A direct hit would. Tanu Rabbanan, we have another brisa. The rabbis taught, Tiko al eino v'kasa. If he struck the slave on the eye, and he he darkened it. So he didn't actually blind the person, but he made the person now he weakened the person's vision. Al sheno, or on the tooth, v'nadada, and he made it loose. So the Brisa says, is that enough to set the slave free? It depends. If they're still usable, the eye or the tooth, that's not enough to set the slave free. But if it's not usable, so if it's, he could see maybe a tiny bit, but not enough to actually function, or if the tooth is loose to the extent that it can't be used, then the slave does go free. Tanya idach, we have another brisa. Hareshaisa eino kahuya. Let's say the slave already had a weak eye before the master got to him. Visama, and now the master blinded him. So he took him from, let's say, like 50% vision. The first case was he took him from 100% vision to 50% vision, or less. Now our case is he took him from 50% vision to 0. So then, or Sheno, or Neduda, or the guy had a loose tooth, the Pila, and the master knocked him out. So the Brisa says, is that enough to set him free? He was already halfway there. So is that the master's fault? So the Brisa says, if they were usable before, they had a function, then the slave goes free. But if not, then the slave does not go free. So if the weakened eye was usable, then the master took him from a usable eye to nothing. Then that means he goes free. But if it wasn't usable in the first place, and then they get fully blind, that would not be enough to set the slave free. And the same with the tooth. If it was usable, and then he knocked it out, it was loose, but it was usable, and then he knocked it out, then the slave goes free. If it wasn't usable, he doesn't go free. Says the Gemara, Utsricha. Gemara says it was necessary to teach me both this case and the first case where you went from 100 down to 50 or less. That we said if it's still usable, then the slave does not go free. If it's not usable, then the slave does go free. So the Gemara says we need both. Meaning, the Gemara, I guess, is bothered. They both seem to be teaching me the same thing. That a usable tooth or usable eye is usable. And so, if you take it down to that, but it's still usable, he doesn't go free. If it was at that, and then you take him down to 0, then he does go free. But it's bringing out the same idea that a usable eye is considered an eye, and a not usable eye is not considered an eye. And the same thing with the tooth. So why do I need two brises that seem to teach me the same thing? Says the Gemara, we need them both. We're in the middle of the first medium-sized line on the page. If you had only taught me the first one, meaning the halacha, that if you take him from 100 down to 50 or less, and 100% vision, and down to a lower, weakened his vision, where we say if it's still functional, he does not go free. If it's not functional anymore, he does go free. If you had only told me that, I would say, Mishum Demeikara Nahara Bria Vahashta Nahara Kachisha. I would say, well, originally he had a very healthy eyesight, and now he has weak eyesight. So that's enough if he can't see to set him free. But in the second case, where he already had weakened sight, and you just brought him down to 0, so even though it was functional, but it was weakened, so maybe maybe I would say he doesn't go free. So that's why it came to teach me, no, he does go free. As long as it was functional is functional. And if it only told me the second case, that if it's at 50%, but it's functional, but you take it down to 0, he goes free, I would say that's because he got it down to 0. That's why he goes free. But in the first case, where you got him down from 100 to 50 or 40 or whatever percentage, but you didn't blind him completely, I would say he doesn't go free. That's why it's necessary to tell me that he does go free. So anytime you go from, basically the golden rule here is, anytime you go from functional vision to not functional vision, the slave goes free, whether it's from 100 to 30, or from 50% vision that works to 0, whatever it is, it seems that he would go free. And the same with the tooth. A functional tooth to a non-functional tooth sets the slave free. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Hari Shahaya Rabbo Rofe. Let's say the master was a doctor. Va'amar lo likholo eino. And the slave said to him, please color my eye, put in some kind of medicine. So he asked for some kind of medicine in his eye. Visama, and as a result, the master, the doctor, accidentally blinded the slave. Or the master's a dentist. Laughter lo sheno, and he asks him to drill and clean out his tooth around it, or something like that. The pila, and accidentally the master knocks out the tooth. So what is the halacha there? There the slave asked him for help. He asked him to put medicine in. He was trying. The slave wasn't. The master wasn't like attacking. He was trying to treat him. So does that free the slave? Says the Brisa, Sichek ba'adon v'yetze l'chayrus. It's like the slave played with him, he tricked him, and he goes free. So even though, this is the first opinion of the Brisa, even though he was treating him and trying to help him, he still sets him free if he blinded him or knocked out his tooth. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says no. It says in the pasuk, it says that when you strike the eye of your slave or maidservant, vishichasa, and damage it or destroy it, then he goes free. So it says Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, it's vishichasa and damage it, achi skaving l'shachasa, and we learn from there, kind of an extra word, that you're not liable until, he doesn't go free unless you meant to damage it. Vishichasa, you meant to destroy him. The Rabbanan, so what did the Rabbanan respond? The Rabbanan who said that even if you don't intend, even if you're trying to help him, he still goes free. Hi Vishichasa my Abdullah. What do they learn from this extra word Vishichasa, and you damage him? Look at the Tanya. They need it for the following Brisa that says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Hari shehoshit yadu l'meishivchasa. Let's say you have a doctor, a master who's a doctor, and this time he's a delivery doctor. He's OBGYN, and he's helping his maidservant give birth. And somehow Visima Uber Shemimeyeha, and he blinded the baby in the womb. Pater, he is exempt. He is exempt. I guess again it means he doesn't set her free. He doesn't have to set the child free, I guess. Maybe, I suppose maybe you would say he blinded him, her, this baby, so the baby would not become a slave. But no, the Brisa says that he's pater. My taima, why? There has to be intent. So the difference is that the Rabbah, the difference between they both seem to say the same thing. That's until you have intent. But the difference is that this case he didn't intend to touch the eye in the first place. So the Rabbanan agree that if he has no intention of touching the eye in the first place or the tooth, and then he accidentally does, so then he doesn't set the slave free. And that's why when he's helping this maidservant give birth and he accidentally blinds the baby in the womb, he can't even see what he's doing. He wasn't intending to touch the eye, so then he wouldn't set the slave free. But in the first case, the Rabbanan say, where he's trying to treat the eye, he just messed up and blinded him, but he's intending for the eye. So therefore he doesn't go free. That was the opinion of the Rabbanan. Reb Shimon Gamliel says he does. So now the Gemara says, the Idach, and the other opinion, how does Reb Shimon Gamliel know, I guess, to go two steps? Meaning the Rabbanan only went one step. They said if you don't intend for the eye, and you get it by accident, then you don't go free. That's what the Shichasa is teaching you. And Reb Shimon Gamliel is willing to go even one more step and saying even if you did intend for the eye, but you intended to treat it, also he doesn't go free. So how does he get there? How does he get two steps? So the Gemara says, the other opinion, mi v'shiches shichasa nafka. If it wanted to teach me one thing, it could have just said v'shiches, and he damaged. What's v'shichasa? He damaged it. So it's coming to add something more. That's how I can learn these two steps. Not only if you didn't intend for the eye at all, but even if you intended for the eye, but just intended to treat it, and accidentally blinding him, then he sets him free. The Idach and the Rabbanan, who don't hold of that, don't hold of both steps, Shichasa lo darish. That's because they don't darish and they don't learn out anything from, they don't consider this two steps, this word extra that you can make two things out of it. You can only make one drasha. So you only go one step that if he didn't intend for the eye at all, and he got it, like the baby in the womb, then that does not set this slave free. Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said, we're on the first wide line in the middle. Rav Sheshes said, Hare shahaisa eino smuya. Let's say the slave already was blind. V'chitata. But the master knocked it out. So he didn't blind him, he was already blind, but he had an eye, and now the master knocked out his eye. Poked it out. Then, says Rav Sheshes, Eved yotze b'hem l'chirs. The slave is set free. My taima. Why? Mechusar everhu. Because you made him lose a limb. May not have been functioning, but apparently he says that that's enough. If you knock it off, that's enough. It won't regenerate, it won't grow back. That's enough. V'tanatuna. And we have another brisa to this effect. Another Mishnah. It's a brisa or a Mishnah. It says, Tamos v'zachris b'behema. When it comes to karbanos, every karban has to be both a tam, it has to be unblemished, and it has to be zachar, it has to be male. Except for ein tamus v'zachris ba'opos. When it comes to bird offerings, that's not the case. It does not have to be unblemished. It's okay to have certain kinds of blemishes, and it doesn't have to be a male. It could even be a female. Says the Gemara, Yachol, says the Brisa really, Yachol yavsha Gapa, Nikta, Ragla, Neftata, Eina. You might think if the bird is allowed to have a blemish, so you might think that even if its wing withered and fell off, or its leg is cut off, or its eye is poked out, you might think that even then it could be brought, because it's okay to have blemishes on the birds. Talmud Lomar, and that's why the Torah says, Min ha'of. It says if you will bring from the birds. But that implies from amongst the birds, velo kol ha'of. You can't just bring any bird. What is excluded if not a blemish? It must be if it's actually missing a piece of its body. It's not a simple blemish. But it's something more like a missing body part, like a missing eye. So we see that missing an eye has greater significance than blindness. Meaning, well, really, it's like this. One of the types of mumim of a bird would be blindness. So let's say that a mum is a blemish. So if a cow has a blemish, a bull, it can't be it can't be brought as a carbon. If it's blind, that's a blemish. It can't be brought as a carbon. If a bird is blind, it could be brought as a carbon. But if its eye is knocked out, it can't. So we see that eye knocked out is another step above being blind. So this slave who's already blind, but if the master knocks out his eye, then the slave gets set free. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Rav Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, Haisalo Yiseris. What if he had an extra finger? So he had 6 fingers on a hand, v'chatcha, and the master cut it off. So he eliminated a limb that won't regenerate. So does the slave go free? But it's an extra limb. So Rav Chia bar Ashi says, in the name of Rav, Eved Yotzi B'layim L'cheiros. The slave does go free for having that finger cut off. Even though it's extra. Amar Rav Huna said, V'hu shenisperes al gavayah. But that's assuming that that finger appears in the row of fingers. But if it's an extra finger, I guess somewhere off in a weird spot, so then that's not, I guess it's not normal. It's obviously an extra finger is never normal, but it's not in line. And so in that case, if the master would cut off that finger, then the slave would not go free. But if it's a normally placed finger, it's just extra, then the slave does go free. Okay, we'll continue here next time.